This is the entrance to my apartment building car park. There's a roller door behind me that you can only access with a remote. And if you do happen to force your way in, it sets off an ear-piercing siren. Now, it all seems pretty secure, right? But one day, as I was leaving for work early, as I was pulling out, I had a feeling something wasn't quite right. That's me pulling out of the garage at the crack of dawn. But before the door has time to close, this guy manages to sneak in with his sights firmly set on my brand new e-bike. Now, I didn't see him sneaking in, but as I drove away, I had this overwhelming urge to go back inside and investigate. So I pulled over and went back in. Unfortunately, this guy is far too slick for me. Just as I'm about to return, he scurries off, leaving a piece of cardboard wedged in the gate. I have a quick look around, shut the roller door and head back to my car. And as soon as the coast is clear, the thief comes back to finish what he started. It may not have been enough to save my bike, but my gut instinct turned out to be 100% correct. So what's the deal? Was it a lucky guess? Do I have magic powers? Nope. It turns out that these gut feelings are based in cold, hard science.
So when I first tell people we're studying intuition, the elephant in the room is, what do I mean by that, right? I don't mean something woo-woo, something magical. I don't mean tapping into the universal energy of the planet or anything like that. And I say I'm a neuroscientist and we come at this from a very neuroscientific perspective, and that we can understand and define intuition from everything we already know in psychology and neuroscience.
8 years ago, Professor Joel Pearson set out to prove the existence of human intuition by manipulating the relationship between the mind and the eyes.
It's pretty simple. So if I'm looking at you, for example, and I put my hand up in front of one of my eyes, what this eye sees the hand, the other eye sees you. Now, if I make this hand very bright and flickering, then it will dominate, it'll win the battle, and whatever's in the other eye will be completely unconscious. So if I put a picture in this eye of, say, a banana or an apple, and I have a bright flickering pattern in the other eye, I'll never see the apple or the banana. But here's the thing, my brain will still be processing it. My eye will process it, it'll send the information back to my visual cortex, and it'll still respond. And if I put an emotional image to my eye, say a spider or a snake or something, that'll all happen, plus the emotional parts of my brain will be active. So I call that emotional inception. You're going to see a whole lot of flickering bright colours on one side.
As Joel used a stereoscope to plant emotionally stimulating images into the subconscious minds of his volunteers, he asked them to perform simple decision-making tasks on a computer, and he found it didn't take long for the information he was secretly feeding them to directly influence their decisions.
Over, let's say, 10 or 20 trials, their brain starts to learn to use the information, so it gets better and better. Their choices get more accurate, they respond more quickly, and when we ask them how confident they are, they're more confident in these decisions. When we first discovered this, we were like, oh my gosh, wow. Like, the brain is simultaneously fusing these two data streams, one conscious, one unconscious, together. So it's using the unconscious emotional information and improving the conscious stream of information to improve decisions. Intuition is the learnt use of unconscious information for better decisions and actions. So the example I often give is you walk into a cafe, right? You're gonna buy a cup of coffee and you step through the front door. And in that second, when you enter the front door, you get a feeling, right? And maybe it's, this place is good, or maybe, not so much. Let's go to the cafe across the road. And so what's happening in that moment you walk through the door? So your brain's processing all the different cues in the environment. Maybe it's the music, the temperature, the tablecloths, how trendy the staff look, the shape of the coffee machine, how clean the floor is, but 100 other things. And through all the times you visited cafes before in your life, your brain has learnt which things in the cafe environment predict good coffee or bad coffee. So that second you're walking into the cafe there, all that learning is triggered and your brain's red flagging or green flagging different things in the environment. You're not consciously, logically thinking through, oh, this, therefore that, therefore this, we should go somewhere else. It's a feeling. And your body is tapping into that unconscious response and you're feeling that physiological response in your body. So with Luke's example, I think it's a great example of intuition in action. So I love it. What I would say is when he was down there, his brain would have been processing a ton of things, right? And so over his life, his brain's learned lots of things, you know, what's safe, what's unsafe, what's secure, what's unsecure. And a few things out of all that were red flagging in his brain. And he wouldn't have necessarily known what they were, but that results in this sort of, this funny feeling, this gut response, right? He felt it, he came back in to check.
Joel's research suggests that a lot of the time it really is a good idea to listen to your gut. But he's quick to point out that we need to be mindful of how and when we pay attention to these feelings.
If you've never played chess before, you can't sit down and be an intuitive chess player. Your brain has to learn the patterns, it needs to learn which array of pieces on the board predict what things. And so you need to give your brain enough exposure to whatever it is before you can trust your intuition. If you're scared of getting on an aeroplane, that's anxiety about flying, that's not your intuition. If you're stressed, anxious, emotional, suffering from anxiety or depression, it's not a good time to trust intuition. And you shouldn't. You should try and get your physiological state back down to a baseline if you can, before you want to trust intuition. And it's really important that people don't confuse the feeling of intuition with something that's addictive, right? So with your drugs, your alcohol, including food, but also behavioral things like gambling or social media or checking email. The pull towards those addictive things can feel a lot like intuition, but it's not intuition. It's nuanced, but it's not that complex. They can learn when to trust it and when not to trust it. And if you do that, you can improve your decision-making. You can sort of bring in the cognitive, the logical, and the emotional sides together and make overall better decisions.